Some pickup trucks break down before they ever reach 200,000 miles. Others survive wars, deserts, floods, fire, and decades of punishment that would leave any ordinary vehicle in a scrapyard. But here's the shocking part. The truck almost everyone believes is the toughest isn't actually number one. Today we're counting down the 10 toughest pickup trucks ever built, the machines that refused to quit when everything around them fell apart. And by the time you see what claimed the number one spot, you'll understand why some mechanics call it the closest thing to an indestructible vehicle ever built. Toughness here isn't about horsepower or a glossy brochure. It's about what a truck does when nobody's watching. We're measuring durability, reliability, and longevity, along with real-world abuse in military service, farming, mining, humanitarian work, and decades of global reputation earned the hard way. Some legendary names didn't make this list, and that alone might surprise you. If you enjoy incredible truck stories, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because we post new truck documentaries every week. Now let's begin the countdown. Number 10 is the Nissan Hardbody. Introduced in the late 1980s, this compact truck was never meant to impress anyone. It was meant to survive. A simple body-on-frame design, a tough little four-cylinder engine, and a manual transmission that seemed to shrug off years of neglect. Mechanics still talk about hard bodies rolling past 300,000 miles on their original engines, hauling lumber, plowing snow, and getting driven into the ground by teenagers who never once checked the oil on schedule. But that wasn't even the craziest part. Decommissioned hard bodies ended up doing hard labor on farms across South America and Africa, where spare parts were scarce and abuse was constant, and they simply kept running. Its real weakness was rust, since body panels corroded fast in salted winter climates, and interior comfort was almost an afterthought. Here's a fun fact. Some hardbody frames were so overbuilt for their size that owners used them to tow vehicles nearly twice their own weight. Number 9 is the International Harvester pickup. Built through the 1960s and into the 1970s as a companion to the Scout and Travelall. Most people never knew this, but International Harvester built farm equipment and heavy trucks long before it built pickups, and that industrial heritage shaped everything about these trucks. Thick steel body panels, oversized axles borrowed from commercial applications, and engines designed for tractors rather than commuting. Farmers across the Midwest chose International Harvester pickups specifically because they could be repaired with the same tools used on their combines and balers. What happened next shocked everyone who assumed the brand would fade quietly. Restored International Harvester trucks are still working cattle ranches today, over 50 years after they rolled off the line, hauling feed and pulling stuck equipment out of mud that would strand modern trucks. Its weakness was a rough agricultural ride and painfully slow parts availability once International exited the pickup market in the mid-1970s. Fun fact, some International Harvester engines were shared with school buses and farm equipment, which is part of why replacement parts, however slow to find, were built to survive decades of hard use. Number 8 is the Land Rover Defender pickup. Born from a design that barely changed for decades, the original Defender pickup was engineering built for survival, not comfort. Its boxy aluminum body resisted rust in ways steel trucks couldn't, and its simple mechanical systems meant a farmer in rural Africa or a herder in the Australian outback could repair it with basic tools. This is where the ranking becomes controversial, because the Defender wasn't fast, refined, or even particularly comfortable, but it worked in places where nothing else would start. United Nations convoys used them. Safari guides trusted them. Mountain rescue teams in remote regions still rely on restored examples today because newer trucks simply can't match their repairability. Its real weakness was safety and modern crash protection, which is part of why production eventually ended. Here's a fun fact. Some Defenders logged over 1 million kilometers in African mining operations before their odometers were even replaced. Number 7 is the classic Ford Ranger, specifically the compact Rangers built through the 90s and early 2000s. These trucks became the default choice for landscapers, delivery drivers, and rural families who needed something that simply wouldn't quit. Their 4-cylinder and V6 engines were famously long-lived, and their compact size meant less stress on suspension components during years of overloading. Most people never knew this, but decommissioned Rangers have shown up in developing countries with well over 400,000 miles, still hauling goods across unpaved roads daily. The truck's weakness was payload capacity compared to full-sized rivals, along with cramped cabs that limited comfort on long hauls. Fun fact: the Ranger's popularity overseas was so strong that Ford kept building international versions long after the U.S. model was discontinued, only to bring it roaring back years later. Number 6 is the Chevrolet CK series, particularly the diesel-powered K10 and K20 trucks from the 1980s. General Motors built these on a simple, brutally strong frame, paired eventually with the 6.2-liter diesel engine, an engine known more for stubborn reliability than raw power. This is where the story gets interesting. These trucks became a favorite among ranchers and construction crews specifically because the drivetrain was almost boringly dependable. No turbo complexity, no fragile electronics, just mechanical simplicity that kept running through brutal winters and scorching summers alike. Farmers have documented CK trucks surpassing 500,000 miles, often on the original engine block. And that's still not enough to compare with what's coming. But at the time, this kind of durability was almost unheard of. Its weakness was underwhelming horsepower and notoriously rust-prone rocker panels. Fun fact, the 6.2 diesel was so slow that owners joked you could get out and walk faster uphill, yet almost none of them ever needed a rebuild. Number 5 is the Dodge Ram with the Cummins diesel, specifically the early 12-valve engines from the late 1980s through the mid-1990s. When Dodge partnered with Cummins instead of building its own diesel from scratch, it created one of the most legendary engines in truck history. The 12-valve Cummins was mechanically injected, meaning it had almost no electronic components to fail. And that wasn't even the craziest part. These engines have been documented surviving past 800,000 miles, and some owners claim over 1 million, with nothing more than routine maintenance. Oil field workers in Texas and farmers in the Midwest relied on these trucks specifically because they could tow enormous loads day after day without strain. Its real weakness was interior quality and ride comfort, which lagged behind competitors for years. Fun fact, some 12-valve Cummins engines have been swapped into completely different vehicles, boats, and even generators because owners trusted them more than purpose-built industrial engines. Number 4 is the Chevrolet Silverado HD, particularly the Duramax diesel models, introduced in the early 2000s. This is where American trucks started competing seriously on the world stage for heavy-duty toughness. The Duramax, paired with an Allison transmission, created a combination so strong that towing companies and construction fleets adopted it almost immediately. What happened next shocked everyone in the industry. Silverado HDs began setting real-world towing records, hauling equipment loads that seemed impossible for a pickup, and doing it daily without drivetrain failure. Ranchers across the American West still consider well-maintained Duramax trucks family heirlooms, passed down because they simply refused to die. Its weakness was cost of repair when something did go wrong, since the technology, while durable, wasn't cheap to fix. Fun fact, some fleet operators have documented Duramax engines exceeding 600,000 miles in commercial delivery service. Number 3 is the Ford F-Series, specifically the 7.3-liter Power Stroke trucks built in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Ford's F-Series had already dominated sales charts for decades, but this generation cemented its reputation for sheer mechanical toughness. The 7.3 Power Stroke became almost mythical among diesel mechanics for its ability to survive abuse that would destroy other engines. This is where the ranking becomes controversial, because casual buyers assume the modern F-150 deserves this spot, but it's these older, simpler trucks that built the legend. Search and rescue teams, oil field crews, and cross-country haulers pushed these trucks past 400,000 and 500,000 miles regularly. And that's why it still isn't number 1, because as tough as it is, 2 other trucks built even more extreme reputations on a global scale. Its weakness was fuel injector issues in later years and a thirsty appetite at the pump. Fun fact, some 7.3 Power Strokes have survived commercial towing careers exceeding 700,000 miles before their first major overhaul. Number 2 is the Toyota Land Cruiser pickup, built on the legendary 70 series platform. While most people know the Land Cruiser as an SUV, Toyota also built pickup versions specifically for punishing environments, and they became tools of survival across the world. Governments, militaries, and humanitarian organizations chose the Land Cruiser pickup because it simply would not fail in the field. Aid convoys drove them through war zones in Africa and the Middle East, crossing terrain littered with debris and hazards, and the trucks kept moving. Mining operations in Australia ran them non-stop in extreme heat for years without major failure. The United Nations still uses these trucks in some of the most dangerous regions on Earth, precisely because breakdowns aren't an option. Its weakness was a stiff, utilitarian ride and limited availability in markets like the United States. Fun fact, some Land Cruiser pickups have been documented running past 1 million kilometers with nothing more than routine maintenance, an almost unheard of feat for any vehicle. Before we reveal number 1, remember to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, because the next truck has a reputation that even mechanics struggle to fully explain. This truck became something more than transportation. In villages with no hospital nearby, it carried the sick and injured over roads no ambulance could reach. In flooded regions and famine-stricken towns, it delivered food and medicine when every other route had washed away. In the aftermath of earthquakes and storms, it was often the first vehicle back on the road, carrying survivors to safety while the world around them was still in ruins. Long before it became a legend on television, it had already become something rarer, a symbol of hope for people who needed a machine they could trust with their lives. Number 1 is the Toyota Hilux, and here's why nearly everyone underestimates it. The Hilux was never built to be flashy. It was built to survive. Introduced in 1968, this truck was designed with simplicity in mind. A strong body-on-frame chassis, straightforward mechanicals, and engines built to be repaired with basic tools almost anywhere on Earth. That simplicity became its greatest strength. The Hilux earned worldwide fame not through marketing, but through owners who pushed it past every reasonable limit and watched it keep running anyway. Its reputation was cemented in spectacular fashion back in 2003, when the British television show Top Gear set out to destroy one on camera. The presenters bought an 11-year-old diesel Hilux with over 190,000 miles already on it, and then went to work. They drove it down a flight of concrete steps, battering the suspension and chassis. They sideswiped the corner of a building hard enough to dislodge bricks. They drove it into the sea and left it there through a high tide until it was partially buried. They hoisted a caravan into the air with a crane and dropped it directly onto the truck. They doused it in fuel and set it completely on fire until the interior was a scorched shell. Each time, using only basic hand tools and minimal repairs, the crew turned the key, and the engine caught. As a final test, they placed the battered truck on top of a tower block in London that was scheduled for demolition. When the explosives went off, the entire building collapsed, burying the Hilux under tons of rubble. The crew dug it out, made a few small repairs, and it started again. It remains one of the only challenges the show's presenters ever admitted they couldn't win. But real-world stories go far beyond a television test. Hilux trucks have served as makeshift ambulances in remote African villages, hauling patients over roads that barely qualify as paths. They've crossed deserts in expeditions where a single mechanical failure could mean life or death, and they kept moving when support vehicles broke down around them. Militaries and armed groups across multiple continents have relied on the Hilux specifically because of its reputation for starting every single time, regardless of maintenance history or terrain. Farmers in Australia's outback have documented Hilux trucks surpassing hundreds of thousands of miles while hauling livestock feed daily across unforgiving terrain. Even after decades of hard use, many Hilux trucks are still on the road today, engines intact, frames solid, doing the same grueling work they were built for from day one. Its few genuine weaknesses are modest power compared to American rivals and a smaller cabin in older models, but almost nobody who owns one complains, because raw survivability always mattered more than comfort. That's why, despite the popularity of American full-size trucks, and despite the legendary diesel engines further down this list, the Hilux earns the top spot. It didn't win through horsepower or towing numbers. It won by refusing to die in conditions that destroyed everything else around it. Horsepower fades, technology becomes outdated. Newer trucks arrive every year, faster and more refined, and the old ones are pushed aside in showrooms and sales brochures. But true toughness doesn't work on that timeline. It doesn't get outdated. It doesn't get replaced. These 10 trucks weren't remembered because they were the fastest or the most advanced. They were remembered because long after their rivals had been scrapped, they were still out there, carrying families to safety, crossing deserts, hauling loads no one thought possible, and working quietly in places the rest of the world had forgotten. That's what real toughness looks like. Not a number on a spec sheet, but a machine that simply refuses to stop. Which truck do you think deserves the #1 spot? Did we miss one that should have made the list? Tell us in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next truck documentary. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.